You can always feel it before it happens. The shift in the air, the tightening in your child's body, the sudden wobble in their voice. One tiny moment, one tiny trigger, and suddenly everything is on the edge of exploding. Their eyes widen, their breathing speeds up, their muscles tense, and you know the tantrum storm is coming. And for a split second, you wonder, is there anything I can do to stop this? Is there something, anything that actually works? Imagine having a simple psychology trick that doesn't take 10 minutes or a long speech or a complicated strategy. A trick that works in under 60 seconds because it speaks directly to your child's emotional brain, the part that is actually in control during a meltdown. Imagine watching your child soften, settle, and reconnect with you almost instantly, not because you forced them, but because you understood the science of emotions. Most parents think tantrums happen because kids are acting out, being dramatic, or looking for attention. But a tantrum is not defiance. It is not manipulation. A tantrum is the emotional brain, specifically the amygdala, sending a signal that it is overwhelmed. It's a survival response. Kids feel unsafe, overstimulated, powerless, or misunderstood, and their brain goes into alarm mode. This is why logic doesn't work. You could explain the most reasonable thing in the world and the child will still scream. You could tell them to calm down and they'll escalate. You could offer a reward and they'll still thrash because in that moment, their thinking brain is offline. The only way out is through the emotional brain itself. That's where the 60-second trick comes in. The trick begins with a single step that most adults skip. You regulate your own nervous system first. You take one slow breath, not because you feel calm, but because your child needs your calm to borrow. Co-regulation is the foundation of childhood emotional development. When a parent breathes slowly, the child's mirror neurons pick up that pattern. Their body literally syncs to yours. That's why your breath matters more than your words. Before you fix anything, before you respond, before you explain, your job is to physically show calm. One slow inhale through the nose, one slow exhale through the mouth. This signals to your child's emotional brain, there is no danger here. You are safe. Next, you lower your body. Kneel, crouch, or sit so your eyes meet your child's eyes at the same level. Height triggers the threat response. Eye level triggers connection. A child looks up at a towering adult and feels overpowered, which intensifies the meltdown. But a parent who lowers themselves sends a message of safety. You become an anchor, not a threat. Your posture softens their posture before you even say anything. Now comes the heart of the method, the actual 60-second psychology trick, and it's shockingly simple. You name the child's emotion with calm certainty. No judgment, no exaggeration, no interrogation. Just a clear mirror held up to their inner world. You're upset. You're disappointed. You really wanted that. You're feeling frustrated. That scared you. This emotional labeling isn't just comforting. It's neuroscience. When an emotion is named, activity in the amygdala decreases almost immediately. The emotional intensity drops because the brain feels seen. This is why children calm faster when their feelings are reflected instead of dismissed. But naming the feeling is only half of the trick. The other half is the sentence that unlocks everything. I'm right here. These 3 words deactivate the child's sense of isolation, which is often the real cause of the tantrum's intensity. Kids don't just want the thing they're crying for. They want to know they're not alone with their big feelings. I'm right here becomes a psychological reset button. It grounds their emotional storm. It signals you don't have to figure this out alone. You don't have to be scared of your feelings. I'm with you until you're safe again. Something remarkable happens when you combine emotion naming with presence. The child's breathing softens, their shoulders drop, their face relaxes. Sometimes they cry harder for a moment because the safety allows the real emotion to release. Sometimes they collapse into your arms. Sometimes they just stop. But almost always, the tantrum loses its strength. The meltdown starts to shrink instead of grow.
You didn't overpower it. You dissolved it through connection. Parents often misunderstand tantrums as battles, but battles require opponents. When you use this method, you step out of the battle altogether. You join the child on their side. You become the helper, not the threat. And that single shift changes everything. Many parents ask, but what if the tantrum gets worse before it gets better? This can happen especially for children who are not used to having their emotions validated. At first, naming the feeling may unlock deeper emotional release. This isn't the tantrum worsening, it's the emotion finally being released safely. Once the wave crashes, the child's nervous system resets much faster. The more consistently you use this technique, the shorter that wave becomes. A key part of this method is silence. Once you've named the feeling and said, "I'm right here," you don't talk. Not for a moment. Not until the emotional intensity drops. Extra words overwhelm the child again. Silence lets the emotional brain decompress. The child needs space to process, not explanations. This silence is not passive. It is active regulation. Your presence is doing the work. When the child begins to regulate, when their breathing steadies, when their voice softens, when their body relaxes, you move to the second phase, a short, gentle invitation. Something like, "Do you want a hug? Do you want to sit with me? Tell me when you're ready." These choices restore the child's sense of power, and power is what tantrums often erupt over. But here, power is given within a safe container. Your guidance, your calm, your boundaries. Once the child is fully calm, the thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex, comes back online. This is when logic can be heard. This is when teaching can happen. This is when problem-solving becomes possible, but only after the emotion is met. That's why the 60-second trick works so well. It opens the door for cooperation instead of forcing it. As you begin using this approach, you will notice something extraordinary. Tantrums become less frequent, less explosive, and far shorter. The child becomes more emotionally aware. They begin to label their own feelings, sometimes before you do. They become more willing to transition, more flexible, more resilient, because the emotional brain has learned a new pathway. When I feel overwhelmed, I can calm down. You are literally rewiring their nervous system, and that is the power of emotional co-regulation. But the real magic of this technique is what it does for your relationship. Your child begins to trust you with their hardest moments. They come to you instead of pulling away. They learn that you are safe, not just when they behave perfectly, but when they fall apart. And that creates a bond so deep that tantrums lose their destructive power. They become moments of connection instead of conflict, moments of growth instead of chaos, moments that build emotional intelligence instead of damaging it. All of this begins with a few seconds of calm presence, a simple emotion label, and 3 powerful words: "I'm right here." The next part will take this even deeper: how to prevent tantrums before they start, how to strengthen emotional intelligence long-term, and how to turn your home into an emotionally safe environment where cooperation grows naturally.
Now that you understand how the 60-second trick works in the middle of a tantrum, the next step is learning how to use the same psychology to prevent many meltdowns before they even begin. Because the real power of this method is not only in stopping explosive moments, it's in creating an emotional environment where explosions happen less and less. A child who feels understood does not need to scream for understanding. A child who feels connected does not need to fight for connection. And a child whose emotions are acknowledged early does not need to express them through chaos. The first step in preventing tantrums is noticing the early signs of emotional dysregulation. Every child has a pattern. Some become whiny. Some get quiet. Some become impulsive or rough. Some start refusing small tasks. Some frown or clench their fists. Some talk fast or cry suddenly. These signs are not misbehavior. They're warnings. The emotional brain is heating up, and if nobody helps regulate it, the meltdown will explode. When you catch the early signs, you use the exact same technique. You're getting frustrated. This feels hard. You seem tired. You didn't expect that. Early emotion labeling can stop a tantrum long before it forms. The next layer of prevention is predictability. Children melt down most often when faced with sudden change or when they feel powerless. Predictability creates emotional safety. You can use simple previews. In 2 minutes, we're leaving. After the show, we clean up. When the timer rings, it's dinner. These previews prepare the brain. The child feels less shocked and less controlled. Their emotional system stays steadier. Then comes the power of choices. Tantrums are often about control. The child wants autonomy, independence, or the ability to influence their world. When you offer structured choices, you satisfy that need without giving up your boundary. Red cup or blue cup? Shoes first or jacket first? Walk or hop to the car? These small choices reduce resistance dramatically because they activate the child's problem-solving brain. A child who feels a little control doesn't need to fight for a lot. Another preventative tool is connection before direction. When a child feels disconnected, instructions feel like demands. But when they feel connected, instructions feel like teamwork. Before asking anything, offer a few seconds of warmth. Eye contact, a gentle touch, a kind word. Come here, buddy. Okay, now let's clean up. This tiny moment of connection dramatically reduces the chance of a meltdown. Humans, children and adults, listen best when they feel emotionally safe. However, even with all these tools, some tantrums will still happen, and that's normal. Emotional development is messy. Growth is messy. Childhood is messy. Your goal is not to eliminate tantrums completely. Your goal is to respond in a way that builds your child's emotional intelligence one meltdown at a time. When a tantrum does erupt, remember the phases. Regulate yourself, get low, soften your voice, name the emotion, offer presence. Then, silence. Silence is not empty, it is healing. Silence gives the child space to breathe and returns their nervous system to balance. Eventually, the storm will pass. It always does. Afterward comes the reconnecting conversation, but it must be short and simple. Long speeches overwhelm a child who just spent a lot of emotional energy. You might say, "You felt upset. You calmed down. You did that. I'm proud of you." This teaches emotional competence. Then you add a gentle lesson. Next time, say, "I need help," instead of screaming. Or next time, tell me I'm frustrated. These tiny lessons, repeated often, build the child's inner toolbox. Eventually, they begin using those words on their own. That's when you know the method is working. Not because tantrums vanish overnight, but because your child begins handling emotions with more maturity. Another important step is modeling. Children learn emotional regulation by watching how you handle your own feelings. If you yell when overwhelmed, they learn yelling. If you shut down, they learn shutting down. But if you take a breath, name your feeling, and show calm recovery, they learn the same. You might say, "I'm frustrated. I'm gonna take a breath." This shows them a path they can follow. You aren't perfect, and you don't need to be. Children don't need a perfect parent. They need a regulating parent. One of the most powerful long-term effects of the 60-second method is how it rewires the child's emotional brain. When a child consistently receives calm emotional labeling, the pathways that process emotional intensity become stronger, more efficient, and less reactive. The brain literally learns that feelings are manageable. Over time, the child becomes more self-aware, more empathetic, and more resilient. They begin expressing emotions through words instead of through escalation. And eventually, the tantrums that once felt impossible become rare, short, and manageable. But this method doesn't just change children, it changes parents too. When you stop seeing tantrums as misbehavior and start seeing them as communication, your patience automatically grows. You stop taking it personally. You stop reacting with frustration. You start responding with understanding. And this shift brings more peace to your home, more trust into your relationship, and more confidence into your parenting. The most beautiful part of all is the ripple effect. A tantrum that once would have lasted 15 minutes now lasts 30 seconds. A meltdown that once left you exhausted now ends with a hug. A conflict that once created distance now creates connection. You begin to see tantrums not as battles to win, but opportunities to support emotional growth. And your child begins to see you not as an authority to fear, but as a safe place to land. The 60-second psychology trick is simple, powerful, and transformative. It works because it speaks the language of the emotional brain. It works because it honors the child's nervous system. It works because it builds connection before correction. And it works because it turns emotional chaos into emotional safety. When your child is overwhelmed, you no longer have to fear the storm. You know how to walk into it with calm, connection, and confidence. You know how to bring your child back to safety. You know how to say the words that defuse the explosion. You're upset. I'm right here. Everything softens, everything shifts, everything starts to heal. And that is how you stop a tantrum in 60 seconds. Not with power, not with pressure, but with presence. Not by controlling the child, but by connecting with the child. Not by demanding calm, but by modeling calm. And in doing so, you give your child the greatest emotional gift they will ever receive, the knowledge that big feelings are safe, manageable, and temporary, and that they never have to face them alone.